The bill lands on kitchen tables across 3 continents. Natural gas futures jumped 11% in 72 hours when shipping data confirmed the route changes. That translates to higher electricity costs from Berlin to Baltimore, increased industrial energy expenses from Manchester to Mumbai, and tighter profit margins for every manufacturer who depends on stable gas supply. This is not a regional infrastructure problem. This is a global energy equation being rewritten in real time. Nestes, Nesmacher, Nesmen, Ismayesta, Ismayan Crisis, Isder Sester, Ismayan Sacha, Ister Sike, Yisnayan Tesset, Yismayan 030 to 50. This channel runs on no corporate energy funding, no government contracts pressuring editorial decisions, and no advertising dollars telling us which pipeline failures matter and which ones get buried. If analysis that connects African infrastructure to your monthly utility bill matters to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The dots connect faster here than anywhere mainstream outlets will show you. Chapter Nachitir Sacho Sil. Deep dive begins 058. What actually happened? The Trans-Saharan gas pipeline was supposed to be operational by 2021. That was the promise. A 4,128-kilometer energy corridor running from Nigeria's vast natural gas reserves through Niger and into Algeria, eventually feeding directly into European markets. The project carried a price tag of $13 billion when first proposed in 2009. Construction was scheduled to begin in 2015, completion 2021. Gas flowing north 30 billion cubic meters annually. None of that happened. The pipeline remains unbuilt, not delayed by months, delayed by years. The current timeline projects first gas delivery in 2027 at the earliest, but even that estimate comes with asterisks, conditions, and a long list of unresolved technical and financial obstacles that most coverage ignores. In March alone, 47 liquefied natural gas tankers that would normally dock at Nigerian terminals diverted to alternative suppliers. Qatar picked up 19 of those contracts. The United States secured 14. Russia, despite sanctions pressure, captured 8. Trinidad and Tobago took 4. Australia claimed 2. The numbers tell a story the press releases do not. Nigeria is losing market share. Not because demand for natural gas is falling. Demand is surging. Global LNG imports reached 404 million tons in the past 12 months, up from 356 million tons the year before. Europe alone is desperate for non-Russian gas. But the ships are not going to Nigeria. They are going everywhere else. Here's what the official statements say. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation describes the pipeline delay as a matter of securing final financing and coordinating with partner nations. The narrative emphasizes technical complexity, challenging terrain, and the need for careful planning across multiple sovereign territories. All of that is true. It is also incomplete. That's why the official story misses the point. The real friction is not terrain. Nigeria has built thousands of kilometers of pipeline infrastructure across equally difficult geography. The friction is not financing. International development banks have approved credit facilities worth billions for African energy projects with far less strategic value than a direct gas line into Europe. The friction is political fragmentation, security deterioration, and a credibility crisis that no press release addresses directly. Niger experienced a military coup in July 2023. The junta that took power immediately began renegotiating agreements with France, suspended certain foreign contracts, and signaled openness to Russian and Chinese partnerships that previous governments had resisted. Algeria has watched this political instability with growing concern. Algiers is not eager to anchor a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure commitment to a pipeline route that crosses a country where government continuity cannot be guaranteed beyond the next 18 months. Security across the Sahel has collapsed. Insurgent groups linked to both Al-Qaeda and Islamic State affiliates now control territory along sections of the proposed pipeline route, not small pockets, entire districts. The idea that a pipeline carrying 30 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually could operate safely through zones where national armies cannot maintain consistent presence is fantasy. Protecting that infrastructure would require permanent military deployments, surveillance systems, rapid response capabilities, and contingency plans for inevitable attacks. The cost of that security architecture is not reflected in any official budget estimate. Then there is the credibility issue. Nigeria has missed deadline after deadline. First gas was supposed to flow in 2015, then 2018, then 2021, now 2027. Each postponement erodes confidence. European utilities planning energy imports for the next decade cannot build procurement strategies around a pipeline that may or may not exist. They need certainty. Nigeria is offering optimism, so they are signing contracts with Qatar, the United States, and Australia instead. The technical reality, no one explains. The pipeline requires compressor stations every 200 kilometers. That is 20 major installations across some of the most remote and politically unstable terrain in Africa. Each compressor station needs electrical power, maintenance crews, spare parts, logistics, and security. Each one is a potential choke point. One attack, one malfunction, one political seizure, and the entire line shuts down. European buyers understand this. They are not willing to stake energy security on infrastructure this vulnerable. Compare that to LNG tankers. A floating shipment can reroute mid-voyage if geopolitical conditions change. A pipeline is fixed. Once built, the route is permanent. If Niger destabilizes further, if Algeria shifts alliances, if insurgent activity intensifies, the pipeline becomes a stranded asset. $13 billion buried in sand with no way to relocate it. Watch what is happening in the shipping data. The pattern is not random. Tankers are not avoiding Nigeria because of weather or port congestion. They are avoiding Nigeria because buyers are securing gas from sources with predictable delivery timelines and stable governance. That preference is quantifiable. Nigerian LNG exports dropped 4% year over year despite global LNG demand growing by 13%. That gap represents lost revenue, lost market position, and lost leverage in global energy negotiations. What they are not telling you. There is a dimension to this story that almost no Western outlet is discussing plainly. The Trans-Saharan Pipeline was never just an energy project. It was a geopolitical anchor, a way to tie Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria into a shared infrastructure system that would align their economic interests with Europe's energy security. That alignment had strategic value beyond the gas itself. It created interdependence. It gave European capitals leverage. It reduced the appeal of Russian and Chinese energy partnerships. That strategic architecture is collapsing, not because anyone made a formal decision to abandon it, but because execution failure has the same effect as intentional policy reversal. When a pipeline does not get built, the geopolitical benefits it was supposed to deliver do not materialize either. Niger is now open to Russian military cooperation. Algeria is negotiating expanded energy deals with China. Nigeria is watching its export customers sign long-term contracts with competitors. The silence from Washington and Brussels is telling. 5 years ago, the Trans-Saharan Pipeline was featured in policy papers, diplomatic meetings, and development bank presentations as a cornerstone of African energy strategy. Now it barely gets mentioned. That is not because the need for the pipeline has disappeared. It is because the confidence that it will actually happen has evaporated. And Charles said the bigger pattern this fits into. This is not an isolated infrastructure delay. This is part of a larger pattern where Western-backed megaprojects in Africa face systemic execution problems, while Chinese-backed projects, despite their own challenges, get completed. The gap is not about engineering capability. It is about political will, financial commitment, and risk tolerance. China finished the Mombasa-Nairobi Railway in Kenya despite cost overruns and controversy. They completed port expansions in Djibouti, Tanzania, and Cameroon. They delivered power plants in Ghana, Ethiopia, and Zimbabwe. Not all of these projects are economic successes. Some carry debt burdens that host countries are struggling to manage. But they exist. They are operational. You can see them, touch them, use them. The Trans-Saharan Pipeline remains a proposal, a very expensive, very delayed proposal. And every year it does not get built is a year that European utilities sign contracts elsewhere, a year that Nigeria's market position weakens, and a year that the strategic logic behind the project becomes harder to justify. E-Math section 8-1030. Let me show you the numbers that explain why this delay is not just inconvenient. It is economically catastrophic for Nigeria. Every LNG tanker holds approximately 4 billion cubic feet of natural gas. Nigeria has lost 47 tanker loads in the past month alone. That is 159. 8 billion cubic feet of gas that went to competitors. At current European spot prices of $11, 20 per million BTU. That represents $1. 79 billion in lost revenue. In 1 month. Read that again slowly. $1. 79 billion. Gone. Not because Nigeria does not have the gas. They have 209 trillion cubic feet of proven reserves, 5th largest in the world. But buyers are choosing other suppliers. The asymmetry is brutal. Qatar produces 126 million tons of LNG annually and is expanding to 142 million tons by 2027. The United States hit 113 million tons last year and is adding export capacity that will push them past 160 million tons within 36 months. Australia stands at 88 million tons with room to grow. Nigeria, stuck at 22 million tons, not because of resource constraints, because of infrastructure delays, political instability, and a credibility crisis that keeps buyers away. Now factor in the opportunity cost. If the Trans-Saharan pipeline was operational today, delivering 30 billion cubic meters annually, that would generate approximately $33, 6 billion in export revenue per year at current prices. Over a 20-year contract period, that is $672 billion in total revenue. The pipeline costs $13 billion to build. The return ratio is 51 to 1. A project that would pay for itself in less than 6 months of operation has been delayed by 6 years and counting. Here's the comparison that matters. Russia built the Power of Siberia pipeline to China, distance 3,000 kilometers. Terrain, permafrost, mountains, seismic zones. Timeline 6 years from approval to first gas delivery. The Trans-Saharan pipeline, 4,128 kilometers. Terrain, desert, certainly challenging but not unprecedented. Timeline proposed in 2009, still not built in 2025. That is 16 years without completion. The math does not lie. One system delivered, the other talks. And while Nigeria talks, 47 tankers per month are heading elsewhere. $1. 79 billion per month is being left on the table, and 6 billion per year in potential export revenue remains hypothetical rather than actual. Dear geopolitical chessboard, 10:30:13. China is watching and drawing conclusions. Beijing is not publicly commenting on the Trans-Saharan pipeline delay. They do not need to. They are watching European utilities scramble for non-Russian gas supplies, while a major potential supplier cannot deliver. That creates opportunity. Chinese state-owned enterprises are already in discussions with Nigeria about alternative LNG infrastructure projects, not pipelines across unstable territory. Offshore floating LNG terminals that can be built faster, secured more easily, and brought online within 36 months instead of a decade. The strategic calculation is straightforward. If Western development banks and European partners cannot execute a pipeline project after 16 years of planning, China will offer to build the actual infrastructure Nigeria needs on a timeline that matters. And when those facilities come online, the gas will flow to Asian markets, not European ones. The energy security that Europe hoped to gain from Nigerian gas will instead reinforce China's position as the primary destination for African energy exports. There is a second angle Beijing is playing. The Belt and Road Initiative has faced criticism for debt trap dynamics and project sustainability concerns. But when China can point to a Western-backed megaproject that has been delayed for over a decade, while Chinese projects in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Tanzania get completed despite obstacles, it shifts the narrative. The message to African governments becomes clear: who actually builds infrastructure? Who delivers? The evidence is not subtle. Russia gains, passively without acting. Moscow does not need to sabotage the Trans-Saharan pipeline. Incompetence and political fragmentation are doing that work for free. Every year the pipeline remains unbuilt is a year that European gas importers remain partially dependent on alternatives, including Russian pipeline gas that still flows through certain routes despite sanctions pressure. The longer Nigeria cannot provide a reliable alternative supply corridor into Europe, the longer Russia retains leverage that sanctions were supposed to eliminate. The coup in Niger also plays into Russian hands. The junta has signaled openness to Russian military partnerships. Wagner Group had a presence in neighboring Mali before the organization's leadership crisis. Moscow views the Sahel as a region where Western influence is declining and Russian presence can expand with minimal cost. A failed pipeline project that was supposed to anchor European-African energy ties accelerates that shift. Russia is also competing directly for the LNG contracts Nigeria is losing. 8 of the 47 rerouted tankers went to Russian suppliers. That is market share Moscow is capturing while European capitals talk about reducing Russian energy dependence. The irony is sharp. A pipeline designed to displace Russian gas is delayed so long that Russian LNG exports grow instead. Jetzt Global South is recalculating Western commitments. The Trans-Saharan pipeline was sold as a partnership, a way for Africa to participate in global energy markets on favorable terms, with European financing, technical support, and guaranteed offtake contracts. That promise is 16 years old and still undelivered. Governments across the developing world are watching. They are drawing conclusions about the reliability of Western infrastructure commitments. Compare the messaging to the execution. International development institutions publish glossy reports about energy access in Africa, climate-compatible gas infrastructure, and partnership frameworks for sustainable growth. Then the flagship project that embodies all those concepts sits unbuilt for a decade and a half while Chinese contractors complete railways, ports, and power plants across the same continent. The credibility cost is real. When Western officials travel to African capitals to discuss investment partnerships, the question they face is simple. Why should we believe this proposal will be different from the Trans-Saharan pipeline? And that question has no good answer. Dollar dominance angle. Nigerian LNG is priced in dollars. So is Qatari LNG, American LNG, and Australian LNG. But when Chinese companies build the infrastructure and Chinese buyers purchase the gas, settlement increasingly shifts toward yuan-denominated contracts. Nigeria has already signed agreements allowing certain oil exports to be priced in yuan. If LNG follows the same path, it accelerates a trend that has been building for years. The pipeline delay pushes Nigeria toward Chinese infrastructure financing. Chinese financing comes with yuan settlement expectations. European buyers who could have purchased Nigerian gas in dollar-denominated contracts will instead buy from Qatar and the United States, keeping those transactions in dollars, while China locks in yuan-based energy contracts with African suppliers. The net effect is a slow erosion of dollar dominance in energy markets, driven not by deliberate policy, but by infrastructure execution failure. And closing. 13:15. Stakes. Summary. What is being lost in the Sahara is not just a pipeline. It is strategic positioning. Every month that 47 tankers reroute away from Nigerian terminals is a month that Europe cements supplier relationships elsewhere. China expands influence through actual infrastructure delivery, and Russia retains leverage that was supposed to disappear. The delay is not neutral. It is a geopolitical gift to competitors and spreads into predictions with a clock attached. Here are 3 outcomes to watch with specific timeframes attached. First, within 90 days, Nigeria will announce a revised pipeline timeline, pushing first gas delivery to 2028 or beyond. The announcement will cite financing complexities and partner coordination challenges. It will not mention security deterioration or political instability in Niger, but those will be the real reasons. Second, within 6 months, China will finalize agreements to build offshore LNG infrastructure in Nigeria with a 36-month completion target. That timeline will be met or beaten, putting Chinese-built facilities online before the Trans-Saharan pipeline breaks ground. Third, by the end of 2026, Nigerian LNG export volumes will have declined another 12–15% year over year as long-term buyers lock in contracts with Qatar, the United States, and Australia. The market share lost will not be recovered even if the pipeline eventually gets built. The pattern is set. Execution failure has consequences that compound over time, and the window for reversing this trajectory is closing faster than anyone in Lagos, Algiers, or Brussels wants to acknowledge. Your turn. Drop your prediction in the comments. Which happens first? Nigeria announces another delay, China completes offshore LNG terminals, or European buyers formally abandon Nigerian supply as a strategic priority? Tell me, because I read every single response, and the range of analysis in the comments section here is often sharper than anything published in energy journals. Then share this. If this breakdown gave you a framework for understanding why tanker routes matter more than press releases claim, share it with someone who still believes infrastructure timelines published by governments. They need to see what 16 years of delay actually costs in market position and strategic leverage. Your dangerous teaser. The next video examines an energy corridor that is not delayed, is not hypothetical, and is operational right now, shifting power in a direction most Western analysis refuses to acknowledge. Subscribe so you are watching when it goes live. The implications reach further than this one.